What if Undertale was generated by an AI? In this video I will be playing a mod that answers this very question. This mod overrides almost every line of dialogue in the passive throughout of the game with AI generated text, and my goal in this video is to piece together a complete story based on the seemingly incoherent mess of dialogue. Please watch to the end because this video took me a long time to make, and you can find a link to the creator of this mod, SybillsGD, in the description. Long ago, two races ruled over the earth, humans and monsters. The monsters were exterminated by vampires. The monsters escaped and hid in the human world forever. They are waiting for the perfect moment to make a comeback. For 2 years, I gained weight. To view the content in your browser, please download Adobe Reader. Although Simon Redpath was not afraid of the unknown. Shut up. Okay, so this actually tells us a number of things. Firstly, it tells us that there were 3 races in AI Tale: humans, monsters, and vampires. The monsters were exterminated by the vampires. Next, it tells us that those who survived hid in the human world, which must mean the underground, as that is where we find them, thus implying that before the vampires defeated the monsters, the underground must have belonged to the humans. Finally, it tells us that the human that is shown in the story is named Simon Redpath. However, we do not yet know if Simon is the human we play as, or a dead human, like in Undertale. So the journey begins and I meet Flowey. He immediately starts talking about someone named Jackie who he was in a relationship with, but who left him for a doctor, seemingly because he abused Jackie's credit card. He also mentions World War II here, perhaps meaning he lived through whatever World War II was in AI Tale, possibly the war between humans and vampires that resulted in them finding in the human world. He then decided to attack me before Toriel stepped in by attacking him with a fireball, as usual. She introduces herself as a weapon, and then seems to hallucinate being in a hotel with her 3 kids. This made me think that Toriel, like in Undertale, has dead children and blames herself for their death. Calling herself a weapon meaning that she is not capable of being a good person, and only kill. This is also reflected in how she says, "If I was faster, maybe they would have survived," which could either mean she had the opportunity to save her children, but was too slow, or that she assumed she killed Flowey with the fireball attack, and she wouldn't have had to do that if she got to us before my life was in immediate danger. She mentioned she wants a dog and that something is too big for her butt, and then I enter the ruins. We make it through a couple puzzles, and the test done before we reach the spike puzzle, and Toriel almost kills us. This tells me that Toriel's own life doesn't matter to her, but she's willing to just charge into a bunch of traps despite not remembering how to do the puzzle, also putting the human in danger. After Toriel leaves me, I continue to traverse the ruins, which were largely uneventful in terms of lore, apart from the Czech dialogue for Frogget, which reads, "Life is difficult for everyone," which paints the current situation and living conditions of monsters in the underground in a very negative light. Then I met Napstablook. Napstablook is immediately presented as quite a serious character. Well, kinda. The Czech dialogue says that they are against a healthy environment. The narrator says Napstablook is staring into the distance, and Napstablook says, "They always understand my trouble." This seems to imply that Napstablook is suffering from depression for some unknown reason. I also died during the fight, which prompted the voice of Asgore to mention a hotel like Toriel did earlier in the game, which supports my theory that whatever happened to Toriel's kids happened at a hotel, and it tells us that, like in Undertale, these kids are also Asgore's. I then finally meet up with Toriel, and it is revealed that my theory was right and Toriel's kids are dead, or at least not in contact with her, and that for some reason she blamed YouTube for this. I don't know, maybe the reason she couldn't save her dying children was because she was busy watching Minecraft videos or something. Once we enter her house, she tells me of her internal struggle brought on by her guilt, which I theorized prior. She says this guilt is for the human, but perhaps she just means that the arrival of another human child reminded her of her guilt, or something like that. Interestingly, when I tried to explore the basement, she mentions wanting a new husband, thus implying she was indeed married, probably to Asgore, as I have guessed. Another important detail is in the description of the calendar, which says, "Inside is an old calendar, it's been 8 years." This tells us it's been 8 years since some significant event. A few guesses I have as to what event this is referring to are that it is the date of her children's death, the day she adopted or had her children, or the date of her and Asgore's falling out. I think it's important to note that the way the narrator says it's been 8 years sounds oddly personal, making me think that perhaps Simon Redpath is the narrator and also has some connection to this event. Toriel leads me to the basement, so I may leave, and the fight begins. This fight tells us a lot of important information. Firstly, immediately after checking the chat dialogue, we learn that Sans is the person she has wanted as her new husband all along. Oh, and that she's conservative, of course. There is also some interesting narrator dialogue that tells us that Toriel was alive to see above ground. These lines read, "Weapon takes a deep breath while she shows you how the sun works. When Weapon looks through you, they know the moon exists." I mean, it is entirely possible that monsters would know this anyway from history books and such, but I think the specific mention of it is supposed to tell us something. This could mean that Toriel is simply a boss monster and thus immortal, or that the war was more recent than in Undertale. Earlier, Flowey also implied that he experienced World War II, which will also be critical in estimating the time gap between the war and present day. I defeated Toriel by sparing her and made sure to check what she'll say if I go back to the beginning of the ruins. It seemed like a waste of time at first, but then I realised I hadn't checked the description for the flower bed when I was here earlier, which reads, "Golden flowers, there are dead bodies underneath," telling us that like an Undertale, Toriel buried her children here. Before leaving the ruins, Flowey interrupts me. The first thing of note is that he says the sun does not exist, which could imply that unlike Toriel, he has not seen the surface, despite his previous mention of World War II, making me think otherwise. Next he tells me that he has a daughter and that the devil's after her, although given what I had known by that point, I could not yet tell how this would impact the story. This is when I begin my journey through Snowdin, which is just chaos. If anyone could decipher any lore from it, then that would be very impressive. I think it's worth mentioning that since there are no humans other than the player, despite this being the human world, this could mean that the vampires also hunted the humans down to near extinction, or that a previous war between humans and monsters resulted in the deaths of the humans, possibly by AI Tales, World War I. Well, after speaking to Sans and Papyrus, I enter Waterfall. I get through a couple of encounters with Undyne before finding something interesting. Here we learn that there could have been a conflict between humans and monsters before World War II. Through the lines, the power to take down their GoFundMe, this is the power the humans feared, which tells us that the humans were saving for something and the monsters took it down, possibly resulting in a war. We also learn a bit about the mysterious vampires that exterminated most of monsterkind and possibly humans too, when interacting with the legendary artifact or legendary RPG in AI Tale. Instead of the inventory being filled with dogs, it was filled with Dracula. When dropped, he appeared before me in the form of dog and stole the RPG. The fact that he could appear out of thin air, like so, tells me that he must be incredibly powerful, meaning it's no wonder monsters lost the war. Also, stealing an RPG means he may be preparing for war, unless by RPG the narrator means role-playing game, in which case he was probably just bored. Then, my suspicions were confirmed. It's unclear whether this power was used, or whether the humans simply attacked out of fear of this power. Either way, the war seems to have come to a close peacefully, meaning that it must have been the vampires who nearly exterminated the humans as they did to the monsters. After escaping Undyne again, I heard Asriel's voice speaking to Simon Redpath, who I believe to be a previous fallen human, about his inaccessibility to therapy. Little did I know that this would be crucial dialogue in the understanding of Undertale's story. On the other hand, this, not so important to Undertale's story. After choosing not to film a porno with Nastabook, I spoke to Gersa. He said some more random stuff about Donald Trump, of course, and also tells me that in Undertale's universe, Alphys is actually Undyne's child. Undyne finally reaches me and tells me of King Lucius Smith's goals to manipulate therapy, maybe to allow people the opportunity to get therapy like Asriel, who could very well be his son like in Undertale. We also learn that Undyne works for him to gain his favour, to start a relationship with him, although it is unknown why Asgore would tell them to attack the human, since unlike in Undertale, there is nothing that indicates the human soul's extreme power, but rather Undyne says that the power of whiskey is the power Asgore needs to achieve this. Then I approached Undyne, and after talking more about Trump, the battle began, but I fled with no issue. I burned down Undyne's house and went to the Hotlands. Hotland, like Snowdin, didn't really hold any story-relevant information, and while not as bad as Snowdin, was still pretty bad. Then there was the Sans dialogue in Hotel, which was also pretty bad. After that, I fought my way through the core and beat Mettaton to finally reach New Home. This tells us a bit about Flowey and that they knew the fallen human who must be Simon Redpath based on the dialogue in the garbage dump. It says that like in Undertale, they were like siblings. So now we know that Asriel lost his sibling, his partner, and presumably his own life in to be reincarnated in floral form. Perhaps his reason for attacking us at the beginning of the game was to let out his frustration on the world. Then at last, I finally met Asgore. Here it is revealed that Asgore has been the therapist this whole time, the one who has let the underground fall into insanity despite having the power to stop it, not even helping his own son. This explains why he wants the human dead. The human, not being from the underground, would be the only one not driven to insanity. They could have the capability to help the monsters of the underground. Slightly he lies to people, telling them that he doesn't have this power, and that it is the power he seeks to obtain. I believe he employed Undyne to find the power of therapy, simply to make it seem as if he wants to help them, and instead really just sending her to do the menial tasks like sending her to get whiskey, as she mentions. It's also possible that he sent her to obtain whiskey in the aims of redistributing it to the monsters, driving the underground into disrepair, perhaps even calling it a form of therapy. Furthermore, the thing the humans were saving for may have been therapy as well, and the war began because the humans were worried Asgore would put a stop to it. Well, after beating Asgore and this abomination, I returned to the underground to complete the pacifist ending of the game. I delivered the letter for Undyne, went on a date with Alphys, then finally entered the true lab. This is where it was revealed that all along, Donald Trump, the one causing immense political chaos, the one who has been foreshadowed and talked about in hushed tones, has been Alphys this entire time. Alphys is, at real Donald Trump. No doubt they were hired by Asgore to lower the underground into deeper disrepair by causing political chaos. We learn a number of other things from these entries as well though. Firstly, we learn the reason the monsters cannot leave is that rather there being a magical barrier, the other side is simply guarded by vampire police. This text also shows that Alphys and Asgore are in contact, confirming my theory that Asgore hires Alphys to become Donald Trump. After managing to find Alphys, I was sent back to New Home. It was finally time to finish this hellish game. Everyone gathered in one place and Flowey returned to his previous form as Asriel Dreamer, and after a long battle I finally completed the game. So let's get a final recap of AI Tale's story. A long time ago, there were humans and monsters. The humans needed therapy, but the tyrant leader of the monsters, Asgore, was a great threat that could put an end to this. Out of their fear, the humans declared war on the monsters, but this war came to a close peacefully. This was the First World War, however another threat arose. A new species revealed itself. They were vampires led by their lord Dracula, who looked a lot like a dog and was immensely powerful. The humans were brought to near extinction, leaving only a few surviving humans. The surviving monsters fled to where the humans once lived, a cavern deep below the surface called the Underground. Among the surviving monsters were Asgore and Toriel, who had a child together named Asriel. Asriel became a sibling to one of the last surviving humans, a child named Simon Redpath, but the human died. This split apart Asgore and Toriel, Toriel blaming herself for their death and burying them in the ruins. Asriel also fell in love with a woman named Jackie who left him, and he became very bitter and angry at the world. His father, despite being a therapist, never gave him the support he needed. At some point, Asriel died. Asgore then hired Alphys to adopt the name Donald Trump and caused mass political chaos. Asriel was revived in the form of a flower, and although it is never explained how, my best guess would be that he was revived by Alphys in the true lab, knowing that he would become a creature of intense anger who would attempt to destroy the people of the Underground and the human. After some time, Frisk fell to the Underground and was partly possessed by the soul of Simon Redpath, and after a long journey, they saved the monsters. Well, sorry there hasn't been a video in a while. I've had some technical issues and this video has taken a long time to make. Please do like and subscribe, I would genuinely appreciate it.